Explainer. So, have you ever stopped to think about why pretty much every society on Earth has families and leaders and some kind of economy? Well, today, we're going to decode the invisible architecture that shapes, well, everything we do. We're talking about social institutions. All right, here's the game plan for today. We're going to start with the absolute basic problems every society has to solve to survive. Then we'll define what a social institution actually is. From there, we'll dive into two super interesting examples, family and politics. And finally, we'll look at what happens when these age-old blueprints start to change. So, let's kick things off with this really big question. It feels so normal, so obvious that we have these things, but why? What's the reason? The answer really gets to the heart of what it takes for humans to live together in groups. As it turns out, every single human society, doesn't matter if it's a tiny hunter-gatherer group or a giant modern country, they all face the exact same set of basic challenges. You can almost think of it as a universal survival checklist. Yeah, so if a society is going to make it, it has to get these 5 things right. You've got to create new members, you got to keep things from falling into chaos, you have to feed and clothe everybody, you need to pass on what you know to the next generation, and you have to give people a reason to feel like they belong. These are like the absolute non-negotiables of social life.
So how in the world do societies handle this big checklist? They don't just make it up as they go. Nope. They create these established, organized solutions that sociologists call social institutions. And that is the key idea for everything we're talking about today.
The best way to think about an institution is as society's official game plan. And it's not a building or a place, it's a blueprint. It's the collection of rules, roles, and shared ideas that gives us a standard way of dealing with all those big survival needs over and over again.
You know, here's a perfect way to picture it. Imagine society is a living body. Well, if that's the case, then institutions, things like the government, the economy, the family, they're the vital organs. Each one has a really specific job, but they all have to work together to keep the whole system running.
And this is where it all clicks into place. Just look at the pattern here. Each institution connects a basic need with values, rules, and roles. Take politics, for example. The need is to maintain order. The value might be something like justice. The rule or norm is to vote, and the roles are things like president or MP. Or look at education. The need is to pass on skills. The value is curiosity. The norm is to attend school, and the roles are teacher and student. See, each one is a whole package built to solve a problem. Okay, let's make this less abstract. Let's look at our first blueprint in action, the institution of kinship. This is basically society's answer to the problem of creating new members. But as you're about to see, the blueprint for what we call family can look wildly different depending on where you are in the world.
Now, most of us are used to systems where we trace our family through both our mom and our dad. But a lot of societies do it differently. In what are called patrilineal societies, like the Iwi in Ghana, everything, your identity, your inheritance, who you are, it all comes from your father's side. But then you have matrilineal societies, like the Ashanti, where it's all about your mother's line. Your identity is traced right through her.
And this setup creates something that sociologists call the matrilineal puzzle. Just try to imagine this. You're a father in one of these systems. You love your kids, you raise them, but they don't actually belong to your family line. They belong to their mother's brother's line. Your official heir isn't your own son, it's your sister's son. It's a really fascinating tension between biology and social rules.
And this just shows how incredibly creative these blueprints can be. I mean, get this. To solve problems like not having any male heirs, some societies develop the institution of female husbands. Now, this wasn't about a same-sex relationship in the modern sense at all. It was a social fix. A woman, usually a wealthy one, would essentially act as the man, pay a bride price for another woman, and then become the sociological father to any children her wife had, all to keep the family line going. Just incredible.
Okay, let's switch blueprints. Let's talk about politics, which is society's answer to that huge problem of keeping order. How do you decide who's in charge? How do you stop everything from turning into a free-for-all? Well, just like with family, societies have come up with some very different solutions.
So societies usually go one of 2 ways. You've got centralized systems like the Econ of Ghana, which have clear hierarchies, think chiefs and kings, and then you have these non-centralized or acephalous systems, which literally means headless, like the Nuer of Sudan. They are basically tribes without rulers.
They keep order not with a boss, but through really complex kinship rules and a delicate balance of power between groups.
So in a centralized system like the Akan, power is superstructured. It's like a pyramid. Authority starts at the very bottom with the household, and it flows up through bigger and bigger groups all the way to the top, to a single paramount chief who's in charge of the whole nation. It's a really clear chain of command.
But then, in total contrast, you have the newer. When the famous anthropologist E. Evans Pritchard studied them, he called them an ordered anarchy. I mean, at first glance, it probably looked like total chaos. No chiefs, no police, nothing. But it was actually the opposite of lawless. Order was kept through this complex web of family duties. A system of balanced opposition meant no one group could ever get too powerful, and that created a kind of stability.
So here's the really crucial point. These institutional blueprints, they're incredibly powerful, they're incredibly stable, but they are not permanent. They're not set in stone. They are living, breathing things that can be challenged, adapted, and sometimes completely rewritten.
And you can see this happen in real time if we look at Ghana, around the turn of the 20th century. First, colonial rule came in and slapped new government structures right on top of the traditional chiefs. Then Christianity arrived, bringing new ideas about morality. A money-based economy totally changed how people worked, and formal education introduced a whole new set of values. All of this put enormous pressure on the old ways of doing things.
But here is the fascinating part. The old blueprints didn't just break and disappear. Instead, they showed this incredible resilience. Traditional institutions bent, they blended, they combined with all these new forces. So what you got in the end wasn't a total replacement, but this unique hybrid, where tradition and modernity live right alongside each other, creating the complex societies we see today.
And that brings us to our final thought. Now that you can kind of see the invisible blueprint that structures society, you can start to ask a really interesting question. Which of the rules that shape our lives are being rewritten right now? What are the debates happening around family, or power, or work? What will those institutions look like for the next generation? Because the blueprint is always a work in progress.